Thank you for joining the April 30th, 2019 VOLTA call. We do record these meetings and post them to YouTube, so please keep that in mind during the discussions and any presentations that we may have today. And to go ahead and get started for today, we've got a few main topics on our agenda. The first one was deferred from last Thursday, so that's looking at the Uniport identifier and the decomposed flow. Matt's going to lead that discussion, and he'd also sent a summary of the options over VOLTA discuss. And then the outcome from today's meeting is our plan is to have a path forward selected from those two options, because this is holding up some of the work right now for the containerization brigade. And then after that, we have new JIRAs to review. And then this is our final week for Sprint 17. So we wanted to check on status for that. Also, it's our last planned development sprint for 2.0. And so I'd like, if we have a minute, to talk about that as well and assess where we are with the 2.0 development. And then a quick recap of what I believe is the status for 1.7. I believe that was a branch was going to be tagged earlier this week, and then moving development to the 2.0 from that point on. So that's our list for today's topics. And Matt, I think I saw you on the bridge. Do you want me to just bring up the email that you sent to VOLTA discuss? Would that,
sure,
that be the best for talking points? Okay. All right.
So I wrote this yesterday afternoon in hopes that would be a short summary, but it became somewhat more wordier than that. But I think really the point comes down to, with the new disaggregated core, disaggregated adapters, some of the ways that peer ports were being set up between the parent OLT device and the child ONU device, in terms of how peer ports are set up, either adding uniports on both the OLT and on the ONU side, or some variation, VENet ONU being the peer port to VENet on the child device. And basically, in working through some of the containerization work, it became clear that some of the old ways of setting up these ports might not work out as well in the new world. And after working through it, it became clear that the options were basically as follows: either we continue working with ports in the same way, and then advantages and disadvantages of that, or we start dealing with some of these ports that need to be reflected on the OLT in some way, but not actually set up as real ports. The options really come down to the first one, like I just said. Rather than creating uniports on parent device OLT and child device ONU and peering them together for as many unis as there are, rather than doing that, passing down as part of the flow decomposition metadata field, but it's not actually a metadata field, it's called a tunnel ID field in OpenFlow, that would identify the channel for that uni, really for that gem alloc ID on that PON port, so that the OLT device can set up specific resources on that PON for that specific uniport. I'm not sure how other OLTs do it other than OpenOLT, but I imagine the scenario is similar, in that the OLT, even though it's operating on NNIs and its PON ports, really it's operating on NNIs and reflections of resources that need to be set up for ONUs and uniports. So option one, which was new, which started off as being yet more data piled onto metadata, which again kind of turned some stomachs, because it's, here we go again, stuffing more things into metadata, or looking for another field in the protocol that would fit the pattern. And I felt that tunnel ID seemed to be a pretty good fit for that. Advantages being, one, that now the device graph and flow decomposition logic scales better, right? We're not setting up a whole lot of duplicate ports and duplicate peers and trying to fight Decomposer and its logic. The one disadvantage really comes down to, now we have to adjust how adapters behave in the new world in terms of how ports are set up, and possibly how flows are handled in the adapters. But again, this I see it as an opportunity to clear up some old technical debt, and this is one of those spaces. The other option is we continue treating uniports in the same way, peering them up on the child and on the parent device. Advantage basically being we can more or less behave in the same way that we have for our adapters, arguably, mostly because there's so much other work that you have to do in the adapter anyway in the new core. This becomes somewhat minimal. Disadvantages being, like I said, we're still fighting the device graph and fighting Decomposer rather than working with it. Both of these approaches, I think, have been tested. There are some Garrett push requests with some of the details that are there, so anybody can have a look at them. But I think the bigger point here is that whichever way we go, anybody working with adapters in the new 2.0 world will have to understand this change and reflect that in their adapters. So I guess it really is now the discussion part. Any comments, questions, concerns, anything that I may have missed or we may have missed in the discuss threads? This would be a good forum to bring it up now.
So just a quick question on the metadata field. So my understanding of the metadata is it's 8 bytes. The first 2 bytes are a VLAN tag. Next 2 bytes are a tech profile ID. And then the least significant 4 bytes are some kind of port ID, right? I guess it could be Uniport or NNI port, depending on the direction of the flow, right?
So yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So basically we're using the tunnel ID to hold another uni ID in here. Is this a 16-byte field, is it, or how big is it?
64-bit total size, so there's quite a bit of room there.
Yeah.
And it from the metadata, the original attempt at this was using the last least significant bytes in the metadata field almost as they were today. The problem is depending on the direction, it may be either the uplink port or the downlink port, but regardless of the direction, PON port is indicated in the flow. Either way, I need to know the specific about it, even if it's northbound traffic. I need to know where is it actually coming from, so it could be popped the tag or pushed the tag depending on the direction. So if Julie, if you want to give me presentation rights for just a minute, I can kind of show the output of some of the flows. It may kind of help a little bit, at least for the tunnel ID change. But like I said, originally started off with metadata, but then it seemed like we're doing an awful lot on that field already. And even though the 2.0 world hadn't started seeing some of the tech profile work yet, it seemed like there was this habit of let's just try to keep putting more and more meaning into those fields. And the one in particular I began to worry about was in the case where it may have been the uplink port in the least significant bits, I still needed the uni port identified somewhere for either the PON port on the ingress or the egress side. So I felt like maybe it was better just to kind of keep hands off. If everybody can see this is kind of a view of the flows here. In the case of even the controller bound flows, if there is a PON port indicated, you can actually see, and this is a multi-uni case, a PON port indicated, and then the actual tunnel ID, aka the uni port really, in its own field. And then some cases where there actually is metadata defined, and in these particular cases, it happens to be the same number, mostly because there isn't a tech profile associated with this release yet. But this could be all 64 bits of metadata being filled in with various fields. The other version of this, and for some reason this view is not showing the directionality of the ports the right way. But let me go pull up my old email here. This one might be better to look at. Yeah, here we go. This one right here kind of shows the story like it kind of should be. Anything coming from the PON port with the CVLAN coming ultimately from this particular tunnel ID, the uni ID, push the SVLAN 13 on it, and then the reverse direction coming from the NNI VLAN 13, pop the VLAN 13 off. Metadata happens to be the CVLAN, but really the tunnel ID that needs to go out on the PON port is 16. Really, this helps later when the open OLT, and I'm sure other OLTs as well, have to kind of decide which path, which ALEC ID, which GEM ID needs to be used for particular flow, particular traffic. It's now identified on its own. But we certainly can use metadata. We certainly can use the same metadata field that we have been, that's already being used in Tech Profile. I just felt like it was beginning to become overburdened with a whole lot of meaning.
Sure. So if the OLT needs to support MPLS in the future, are we going to have a problem with not having that field available?
Good question. Well, then now I guess it's really a question of tunnel ID for one interface and then another tunnel ID for another. So imagine your NNI having its set of tunnel IDs and then your PON port having its set of tunnel IDs. I don't know. I mean, regardless of even PON or even MPLS, given there's only one tunnel ID field, could it be overloaded for ports in one direction and ports in the other direction?
Well, actually, does that really matter? I mean, the MPLS would probably be terminated on the top of rack in most situations, or do you see it actually coming down within to the OLT, and having the OLT required to do that? Because that, we're supposed to be an open flow switch, so how deep should it go into the VOLTHA?
Well, again, tunnel ID is pretty big on its own. It may be that we have to partition it and say most significant are for the NNI side, and then least significant are for the PON side, or let's say the interior peer port side. Might be a better way.
Well, what I meant to say is I think the tunnel ID within VOLTHA, within the logical device, could be used for a different meeting than tunnel ID sitting at the top of rack. So at the top of rack, it would just go by, that's where the tunnel would terminate.
Yeah, and actually, this brings up a good point. This is only an artifact of the decomposer, right? So the tunnel ID field actually isn't pushed down from ONOS itself. The tunnel ID is done as an adjunct bit of information after decomposer has done its job. So it could, OpenFlow from ONOS could still specify the MPLS tag, and then decomposer could then say, take it, do what it needs to on the NNI side, and then after decomposition is done for the ports, for the flows post decomposition, tunnel ID is now used just for that side. So just kind of look here and forgive the pending ad, but the world here still shows in and out ports and the multiple tables and the metadata even as it is, no mention of tunnel ID at all. The tunnel ID is purely just an artifact of decomposition, but still open flow.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends. Is the OLT, if the OLT is the one that's inserting the tunnel ID in order to go out on a particular LSP on the NNI interface, then I guess it may be needed internally. Right? I mean, if MPLS is something that's, and routing is all done external to the OLT, then I guess it's going to be needed, but I guess it's going to be on an application by application basis.
Right. Yeah, I think a better version of this would be if there could be tunnel IDs associated in both the classifier and the match action rule. Then we could use it where it actually is associated with the port it makes sense with. That was one piece that, again, just reading through the spec, it was lost on me in terms of, well, it officially is only supposed to be on the classifier side, but in the case of action, I'm like, well, I need to know which action to send it out on, right? And right now, the only actionable port is the gigantic PON port that represents many, many things. So, I mean, one could argue that the spec might need to be extended in some way to deal with this as well. Other than that, any other thoughts or concerns or frustrations, complaints?
Just one note, Matt, on the option 2 that you had there, the Ethernet adding a UniPort. I think somebody added that code in the simulated ONU or simulated OLT. I can't remember which one. And they put that, I tried that code out, and actually that doesn't work. The reason is because we end up having an additional UniPort on the logical device, which actually matches an NNI port. So it's messed up everything. So that option is just not an option.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, and I kind of suspected that. I tried something similar and ended up with a similar result. You know, if we go down the path of having to do this, I expect there might need to be other changes in the core to prevent the logical rendering, like you said, to keep from getting duplicate ports. But I mean, if folks are generally happy with option 1, and it's really just a matter of implications down the road in terms of other tunnel IDs, yeah, I think it's a fair point. If we want to have tunnel IDs on both sides, we'll have to come up with something, and it may be we bust up that tunnel ID field depending on the direction. But the metadata field, I think, has evolved in the same way, in that it started off being just a couple of pieces of information. Now with tech profile, there's 3. So, you know, I think as long as we don't corner ourselves, we could grow it. But yeah, like you said, logical port stuff where, you know, started getting very confusing at that point.
Yeah, and also like it's we're talking about tunnel ID. Maybe down the road we'll find that whatever we have in the metadata is already used up. We need an additional data then, but we don't have fields for it.
Right. Well, and you know, at some point also, we may also explore OpenFlow 1.5 or some newer version of it that may account for some of these some of these fields a little bit better and might provide some clarity there.
Or at some point, do we decide the OpenFlow protocol is the wrong protocol to be using, and we keep switching and we change the protocol?
Yeah, or that as well. I mean, at this point, we're using it in its protobuf form, so we just need a container for our intent of what we're trying to do. Whether it diverges from there or turns into some other kind of language of description for ports and VLANs and actions and classifying, you know, that again, that could change as well.
So how do we move forward right now?
I mean, I guess it's really a question is, are folks adapter writers, you know, folks who have to deal with scaling components, are they generally happy with this approach, with tunnel ID being a part of the flow message that may be handed down to adapters, and then the change that has to be done to the adapter to deal with it? If folks are happy with this approach, then I mean, we're already set up for it, and we can just move forward. And it's now just an education thing, just being aware of this is something you have to deal with.
And will the tunnel ID now become another parameter for the operation to debug or to look at?
In the decompose flow. So you kind of touch on some of the original reasons why flow decomposition was bypassed for OpenOLT to begin with in 1.x was there was a lot of implied meaning in certain fields that didn't make things clear. Part of this also is an attempt at dealing with that, so we could say, well, we know we have physical PON port this number, which, you know, the numbering being what it is something else, but it could be an actual number on the physical box. But then we also know that the tunnel ID is a representation of that UNI's port number on the OLT side. I think it might make troubleshooting easier and make it look more like what we tried to do with 1.x bypassing flow decomposer, making things a bit more clear. It's just in this case, we're not bypassing flow decomposer anymore. We're just working with it.
Hey, Matt, Sean, quick question. Which other OLT adapter is under development other than the OpenOLT Go and Python ones?
None that I'm publicly aware of.
Then what's the discussion about? So you can do whatever you want.
No, we have to live with it. So the world is not just the OpenOLT.
Yeah, I mean,
But
this is
I don't see any
fair notice
trouble.
to folks who may be working with their own adapters, less out in the open, less kind of just on their own, or more on their own. And it's something like, again, since this affects the read-write core and the VOLTHA Go core, it will affect them. Maybe they don't want to get on these calls and make a big deal about some of the things that they're having to deal with, but I'd hate for something to happen and it not at least have a moment of opportunity to speak up.
Well, I think that the fact that you actually put a lot of this on VOLTHA Discuss is a big step forward from the 1.x days of development.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to read through that thread, the first one, it meanders a bit in terms of different thoughts and different ideas, but it kind of ended up here, in this way to kind of give you an idea. And again, there's also thoughts of, taking additionally the decomposed flow and passing it down through iAdapter, also having other objects passed down through iAdapter as well. It turned out we really didn't need the whole object. We just really needed that uni ID, that very specific element to kind of differentiate it on the POM. But again, there could be more added to that as well.
Yeah, I think my point was it's a bit concerning that there are no other OLT adapters. There's not much discussion from other adapters, so it's we're sort of losing out on real discussion over there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I will actually be working on a Tibet one, but I'm currently I'm just spinning up right now on a lot of work here, so Tibet will be involved in the 2.0.
One thing is, I think the Go-based adapter required this one to be resolved, right?
But both of them do. It's really, the implementation isn't change anything. It's really the logic of what to do. Some of this, at least on the Python side, on the entry point of add flow, there's a bit more parsing that had to be done up front to, piece out the uni ID needed from either the metadata or tunnel ID, whichever, and then put it in the right spots so that, divide and add flow and the various further parsing of the flow in OpenOLT could get the right IDs. So the Golang one would have to add that in as kind of part of its, entry point before the, add eFlow, add LODP, add gem, add HISA. There's those 5 or 6, functions to OpenOLT that get called. It would have to go ahead and begin that parsing process up front. Honestly, I think it ends up making things a bit easier to deal with, because now I'm just going to kind of pull it up real quick. There's kind of this point where when we're parsing these flows, it was easier for me at least to figure out which one we're dealing with up front, and either logging, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I have to do, or not, whether it's controller, whether it's upstream, downstream, whether it's the various IDs are where they need to be before we move on to the actual getting into divide and add flow, at least for OpenOLT, because every one of them beyond this wanted these specific IDs and needed them to do the work it needs to do. So the Go adapter would need to at least add this part in the beginning, but from a code translation point of view, it should be pretty straightforward.
So sorry for my in and out of meeting. So which one you're showing me? Is option 1 or option 2?
I'm in favor of option 1 mostly because I wrote all the code for it. So, but yeah, again, it's a discussion. So,
there's not a right or wrong way. It's a way, and it gives you quite a bit of runway to get it right.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is why I kind of latched on the tunnel ID is now there's all 64 bits of space to work with for any of these things. And, you know, I'd considered maybe even having, you know, more IDing material about what's on the PON port in there. Not so much like what metadata is using, but like, for example, having like the ONU ID number on that PON and the UNI ID number and the ALEC ID number encoded in that field at some point if it helps for other adapters who might need it. And in the same way, maybe taking the first most 32 significant bits, and if we need that for one direction versus another direction, we have some room to work there.
Is there any actual opposition to this approach? I mean, has anybody voiced it?
No, I mean, the only one that I've heard was really about having more in the metadata field, right? Which gets back to if we're having to put that much in metadata, we're really fighting the protocol. And I get it. There's at some point where we can't fight it. So that was one. And that's kind of where the tunnel ID thing came up from. Others, I think it really just comes down to, you know, kind of an expected behavior in the implementation changing and having to deal with that. But again, moving to the new Go core, there's a lot of that in terms of interaction. So I think, you know, this is almost just like par for the course.
Yeah, it's looking like option one is probably a little bit more favorable. I'd probably add that when you do code it up, mention explicitly that you'd be using just like the lower 32 bits of the tunnel ID field and the other are reserved. Yep. So that adapter writers can protect themselves from future change.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I may maybe even change the functions a little bit to mask it out explicitly so that only the bottom 32 are even usable.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's doable.
Thanks, Chip. Do we have any other views from the group to be expressed?
So one more question is it depends on the adapter, OOT adapter to implement which one they use, or once I'm just curious, you know, because if some other vendor adapter comes in, you know, can they choose a different model? I don't know why they would, but I'm just wondering whether it has this flexibility. Basically,
Well,
is this changes adapter level or it's a VOLTHA core level?
From the core's point of view, the change actually is very simple. It's just the addition of a field in the decomposed flow. So none of the logic in the new core changed at all.
Okay.
Now, whether a particular value is put into the tunnel ID, that may change later. So maybe we later have later implementations that are a bit more configurable in terms of maybe what would be desired to have in that tunnel ID more so than just the port, which is kind of like what Chip's saying, is that we, you know, kind of reserve some of that space for future growth, if you will. But I think the big thing is the days of duplicating ports on child and parent device. That is a model we think we do not want to support. We don't want to continue doing that anymore. Looking down the road as well, if you think about the case where you have a DPU being controlled by the same VOLTHA, for example, if it wasn't outside controlled, if it was VOLTHA controlled, then you'd have like a 3-tier setup where you have OLT peer port to an ONU peer port via the UNI to a DPU. And so now imagine a world where you have to sit there and duplicate your peer ports in the old way across 3 tiers of a tree, and how messy that becomes real quick. You know, and that's kind of the other part of this, is it keeps the device graph from becoming kind of a circular mess, if you will.
Okay, and also, sorry, apologize if I didn't hear it correctly. So, for the Turk Telecom, the multi-Gen 4 multi-VLAN per ONU cases, this still hold. The tunnel ID still works, right?
Yeah, what would happen is in those particular flows, it would just be for a particular PON port, for a particular tunnel ID, the VLAN field specified would just be, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, or any, maybe, if you just wanted to have all of them or a range. But even in that case, even for that one particular uni, you would need, that one specifically identified. So let's say Uniport 1 gets its 4,000 VLANs. Uniport 2 may also get its 4,000 VLANs. And now, again, we need some differentiation across them so they can be separated, maybe with SVLANing them on the ONU, for example.
Okay. And I'm just throwing out the question, right? Just assuming I have a lot of time here. Julie, correct me if I'm wrong. Will this also implement the technology profile? Would they need to do any change to adapt with this one?
Not that I'm aware of. There's going to have to be changes in the adapter for tech profile anyway.
Right.
So there's a fair amount of metadata parsing and metadata passing down that'll happen. And even looking at the code for tech profile and then the new core, Decomposer and the new core will still have to be modified quite a bit to wholesale pass down all of the metadata anyway, because, or at least the middle and the last half for the tech profile ID. So a lot of this change is going to happen for metadata anyway with 2.x and tech profile. It's just now at least the uni ID, tunnel ID won't be caught up in any of that, which is kind of another aspect of this as well. It shouldn't confuse the two.
Okay. I think I'm running out of my questions. One more. Amit, what do you think, since you guys are working on the Go side?
Yeah, Sean. So, yeah, I think the tunnel ID approach would be good. I think there's no problem with that. We can use that.
Okay. And Shad? Shad, are you still on? Okay, I think he was in favor, right? Oh, Shad?
Yeah, yeah, it looks good.
Okay. I think I'm done with my questions.
All right, I think that's quorum enough. So,
okay.
I'll
go ahead and take presentation rights back.
Okay.
Julie,
so just
Julie, we didn't request a TST vote on this one, right?
I don't think we explicitly requested one for this. No.
Okay.
But I think
I think the majority already go for option one now. I don't know what Dave Bainbridge or Ken. We're still waiting for Sergio to send out the email to allocate.
Yeah, for me, the option one definitely is the option. Option two is not an option because it affects the core quite a bit, so it's not an option.
Okay.
Okay. So I believe we have a path forward then, and hopefully everyone's seeing my screen again. So it looks like we'll be pursuing option one and using the OpenFlow tunnel ID to capture that info and pass it up. So, and then Matt, you caught the comments from Chip about some clarification there. So I think we're covered. Anything else we need? Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that. And then I'm not sure in terms of documentation. The best place I can think of is just in the code. We'll maybe add some comments in the ONU and in the OLT, OpenOLT, just as for folks who are looking someplace to understand what's going on. They'll put some language in there at least at a minimum to kind of describe this. Otherwise, there needs to be a developer guide for adapters just in general, which I don't think exists. So
well, maybe that's something. Yeah, I think maybe we should include that. Another goal here. Okay, great. Thanks, okay. Matt. So, thank you for all the thorough and example things like that. Julie, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Matt. And Amit, is there anything else you need to be resolved today related to the Go adapter? I think this was the main issue.
Yeah, I think we are okay with this information. So okay. We'll see what changes need to be done, yeah, and work on it accordingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, next topic then today, we've only got about 24 minutes left, so we'll try and go through this as quickly as we can, but take discussion as needed. So the new JIRAs, let's go over to that now. And starting with 1583. So this was the first new one added in. I need to adjust my screen a little bit so I can see. There we go. 1583, add version checking to OpenOLT agent and adapter. This one was opened by Shad. And I'm not sure if we still have Shad on the bridge or not.
Yeah,
yes.
this was a request for on 1.x by the CBOW folks. So I thought that I was going to implement it on 1.x, but I think it'll be very similar. The agent is anyway common, so I was thinking that the code would be very similar for both 2.0 as well. So whenever I do this on 1.x, I'll port it across to 2.0.
Okay, so that maybe, I'm wondering if we should jump over to one of the later topics just in case. So this week is the final week for Sprint 17, and our schedule out of the lockdown had this Sprint 17 as the final one for 2.0. So are we expecting we'll be able to close out the sprint at the end of the week and tag 2.0? I'm not sure if we're there yet.
Well, for the specific this one, I don't think I'll be able to address it this week. So if you have something like a future or for the next thing, you can just move it to that, please.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and I think we have a 2.1 placeholder now. Okay, thank you. Then next item, let's go ahead to 1584. This is a defect that was opened, infinite wait loop in CLI when enabling device on a core when owned by another. And this one was opened by Stefan, and it looks like it's being worked by him as well.
Yeah, I think he's done with that. I'll just confirm with him.
Okay, so in any case, I probably should move it into our active sprint if you think he's wrapping up that work.
Yep.
Let me do that now. Thank you, Ken. Okay. Next, any questions from the group before I move on? Next, we have a subtask that was opened up, OpenOLT, Vol 1585, support OLT disable and enable when no ONUs are connected to OLT. This one, Girish, it looks like Girish will be working on this one. And it looks like it's in progress, but I'm expecting it's placed in 2.1 because work will be continuing past the end of the week before it gets merged in. Is that correct? We may not have Girish on the bridge. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this item? Yes.
Yeah, just Girish sent me an email this morning. So I guess he's saying this is work in progress and under reviewing Garrett, I guess.
Okay.
So he didn't say
some reviews under here. Okay. Thank you, Sean. All right. Was there a comment?
So potentially can be done by this week, right? It's under review.
Yeah, potentially. I'll follow up with Girish and see when he thinks will be done.
So, and it's a subtask, so I'm not sure if I can do too much mapping over there, but we could put it, we may be able to change the version. I'm not sure if I can change the sprint. I have to remember how the subtasks work.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Then I'll go on to the next item then. 1586, another defect that was opened. Possible race condition in OpenOLT Python adapter during ONU discovery. This one was opened by Sirkant, and it looks like he will be working this issue as well. Any comments?
I don't know whether that's a Python-based OpenOLT adapter, right? So if the Python-based will be stopped after 2.0, is that true? Have we made that decision yet? Sorry. So in that case, potentially this one will not be no longer needed.
Regardless of your mechanism of adapter implementation. The fix that was proposed was a modification to the core, but it was modification that had performance implications. So there may still be some back and forth regards in how to deal with this, and how reproducible it is as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
We need to move it to VOLTHA 2.1. Probably we need a better solution that we propose.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item today? All right. Next, we've got Vol 1587, another defect, creating additional uni port on the parent device breaks the logical device. Ken, it looks like you've completed this one.
Yeah, this is a follow-up of what the discussion we had earlier about what Matt was proposing, option 1 or option 2. So this bug is for option 2. It was breaking the logical device in the core. So that's fixed now.
Okay. Okay. Let me go ahead and put that in.
You mean fixed because we do the option 1?
No, I removed it. I removed the code that was added.
Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. So and Ken, I think you have that addressed in the notes in the description field. So thank you for that. All right, next item, Vol 1588. This one is improve the performance of the flow update logic. And Ken, this is another one of yours. And
yes,
it looks like this one is done as well.
How did you do that? How do you improve the performance?
I look at the previous performance and then I measure it, and then I figure out that things were taking a long time to send flows down. And so I had to change things around to make sure it's much faster, and relying less on callbacks and more on make it more a direct call instead of going via callbacks. But callbacks was taking a longer time.
Any other questions for Ken? All right, next item 1589. This was another defect that was opened. Resource manager crashed during get device info. And this one was reported and is being worked by Abhilash.
Yeah, Julie, I think so. The code is merged in already. I'll close this.
Okay,
bug.
great. So let
done?
me go ahead and put it in the sprint. Thank you. And then I'll go ahead and move it to done. All right.
Yep, thank you.
Any other comments before we move on? Okay. Next one, we have a new epic, Vol 1590, enabling multicast functionality in VOLTHA. And so this one, I'm expecting probably is going to end up being worked in 2.1. We don't have do you want me to go ahead and map it to 2.1?
Do we schedule the 2.1 for the? I think based on timeline is 2.1, but I need to remember that. Yeah, we can map that later. That's fine.
Okay, so I believe we had it in 2.1, but we didn't have leads assigned at that point, and it looks like there's some, from an email I saw from Sarov, that there's some Brigade work starting up. So I can leave it unmapped right now if you want while we look into that more.
We'll just put it in the 2.1 if we already planned it on the 2.1.
Yeah, we were mainly looking for owners, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, a multi-case brigade has been set up by Saurav, and 3 different companies will work on that. So we are in the process of opening the test, but I suspect these multi-case things will be on both VOLTHA 2.1 and VOLTHA 1.7.
Okay.
We will see that actually.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's going to start on 1.7. As soon as 1.7 is tagged, 1.7 is being tested right now. So as soon as 1.7 is tagged, then the new brigades will will kind of base their work off of the 1.7 work.
Why are we continuing? Why are we continuing to develop on the 1.7 or 1.x tree, and why aren't we moving to the 2.x tree for the new brigade?
Because 2.0 is not yet ready. That's why, and we will be doing this code on.
Right, we're never going to get stability unless we stop continuing evolving 1.x and start focusing everybody on 2.0. Even not new features, just get people on the core stuff and then move on. I worry we've essentially got a fork here that we're going to continue for a long time. Yeah,
very, very valid concerns. I think we can discuss that sometime later. Maybe we're running out of time now. This was just an FYI. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Let me jump back over here. So I was hoping to hear that 1.7 was tagged based on an email I'd seen last week, but it sounds like that's not the case. So V1.7 is currently under test.
No, 1.7 was branched out.
Okay, got
not
it.
tagged because the QA hasn't yet finished its testing. I mean, QA is just getting started with it. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. So the branch was created, but it's not yet tagged. And once it's tagged, I believe the expectation we had was that, to David's point, that all of the future development work was going to be placed on master with 2.0. So do we want to target discussion if we can carve out some time on Thursday's call to follow up on this topic?
Sure.
David or Sean?
We're gonna need Rob available if he's in moving the brigades and keeping them on 1.x.
Yeah, there's also issues with the version of the BAL as well, 2.6 versus 3.x, and whether bug fixes will show up in the 2.6 branch.
I'll clean this up before I send it out. And so, Sean, I think you said also we need to talk about the BAL 3.0 migration.
Yeah, I mean, there are some bugs in the BAL code that we submitted to the tech profile work to Broadcom, but they're kind of reluctant to do any fixes in 2.6, and they may show up in 3.x. So 1.7, is going to be a little lame in terms of full tech profile support until or unless 2.6 has fixes in it. Otherwise, it's going to be 2.x is the way to go when we integrate with 3.x and the BAL. So.
Yeah. So Sean Ying, I think there's some discussion or email exchange that have been going on in the background that was going to feed into this discussion on the timing for the migration. Do we have what we need from that discussion with Broadcom yet, or is that still?
The Broadcom has, I think right now today there's 2 status report, and I think the decision was made. We need to have the Broadcom to come up with the fixed timeline, and then once the solution has been identified, then we'll have a discussion about that, right? So the discussion has not happened, and I don't believe, based on what I just saw the email, I don't know whether there's a resolution yet.
Okay. So let's see. So Sean Missette, do you think we'll have enough info to hold discussion on Thursday?
Well, I think that Broadcom are doing some investigation and see if the same problem exists in the 3.x BAL.
Okay.
And I think they're just reluctant to put anything backport anything to 2.6. So it just means that 1.7 line, all the testing has to be done with a single TCON, single gem port model.
Right.
You can't go to the single tconf 4 gem or multiple gem ports. And have all the features work. Like there's a delete issue.
Yeah. Okay, let me switch back to the new issues. Then, actually similar to this, we've got the new Epic Vol 1591 for OpenOLT driver migration to BAL 3.0. And so that one, actually this one has the fix as 1.7, so that's probably related to that timing discussion as well. And do we have Jason on the bridge? I don't think I see Jason on the bridge today. Okay, let me refresh.
Yeah, so, Julie, just an update. We had our first meeting for the 3.0 BAL migration yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be having weekly meetings. It is HCore, Jason, Netsia, some folks from Netsia and ONF, yeah. So that work will happen with this small group of migration, which is 3.0 Brigade, and yeah, and Jason will be creating epics or stories related to that. If they're already existing, you know, he'll probably reuse them. Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like maybe rather than having discussion on the VOLTHA call, the discussion would be taking place on the Brigade meeting?
This is for a 3.0, you're saying?
Yes, for the migration to 3.0.
Well, I mean, we have the Brigade meetings, but that doesn't mean that. I mean, if there's something to discuss on over here and in these calls, it's fine. But those weekly meetings that we have will be more technical, more code oriented.
Okay.
And yeah.
Sean, you have a comment? Sean Ying?
Yeah, I understand why the 1.7 is looking for this BAL 3.0. But at the same time, right now, it seems like we're going to have 1.7's linking stay as long. I think probably is a parallel track of the 2.1. I really don't know for the project that's a good direction to take at this point. Again, I do understand there are urgent requests regarding to the some of the demo need to be done. I think we do need to have that discussion, because I don't know how Shad, how much time do you think the OpenOLT adapter, assuming it doesn't have any conflict, the API doesn't change or anything like that, but how much we can have a working OpenOLT adapter with the HCore OOT running BAL 3.0?
Sean, I didn't get your question. How you're asking how long will the migration take?
Right.
So Jason has volunteered to do most of the work, but I will be taking on some things, and maybe Netsia, somebody from Netsia. So we haven't. I mean, this was the first meeting that we had yesterday, so we don't have a full plan yet. I think Jason has just done a code analysis to see what kind of changes are required. So I don't think we have a good idea of how long this is going to take. But as the thing is, we hope it shouldn't drag on too long.
But it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's okay, just a month or two.
How about as a thought, maybe as a requirement, if the OpenOLT agent running the BAL code on the edge core or wherever, if it maintains the proto that exists today, if the same proto, OpenOLT agent proto that 1.7 uses and 2.0 uses.
Oh yes, yes, of course.
Yes. So none of this is a 1.7 or 2.x conversation. It's really, as long as the proto is kept in its current form, both can use them at the same time.
Exactly. So this is this has nothing to do with 1.x or 2.0. The OpenOLT proto buffs are going to remain the same. This is all happening underneath. And it happens to be that we're going to be using 1.7 for testing because that's what is available right now, and that's what has the technology profile stuff, which we would also want to test with 3.0. And so the only difference in the proto buffs is the technology profiles between 1.x and 2.0. So Sean, I don't understand what your concerns are really. If you can come again.
I think the concerns really come down to the confusion of tech profile work and multicast work on 1.7 versus 2.1. But in the case of BAL, I don't think that same concern applies.
But what I'm saying, no, that is correct.
Yeah, so BAL is completely different from multicast and tech profile. When we do the BAL 3.0 migration, we'll have to test tech profile as well.
I understand
a kind of dependency,
but I understand that part. But right now, so the conclusion of the 1.7. So right now, if we put a BAL 3.0 as the deliverable target for 1.7 also, which means we will not conclude 1.7 until this integration is done. Is that correct?
No. 1.7 will be tagged irrespective of BAL 3.0. 1.7 will be tagged as soon as whoever is doing QA on it, Suchitra and Jabel, I think, Sriju, once they certify that it's good to go, or whatever, like with release notes, it will be tagged, and we won't be waiting for either the Broadcom fixes for the tech profile issues on 2.6 BAL. Or we are not going to wait for 3.0 migration. So that's going to be tagged. 1.7 is going to be tagged as soon as the minimal testing is done.
What about IGMP? Multicast?
No. 1.7 is going to be tagged just with whatever tech profile work is done. It's going to be tested and it's going to be tagged.
Is there potentially a 1.8 release coming?
I don't know yet.
Again, I'm assuming that there's going to be work on multicast and these other things that's going to build on 1.7 that implies a 1.8 release.
Yeah, so I think that's not for me. I don't know about that because it all depends on what the brigades do with what they decide to do their testing with, what they decide to do their prototyping or the coding with. So
okay, I think that requires a bigger, maybe even a discussion with Saurav. So I think, again, I said I understand how important IGMP is, right? So potentially we can treat it as implementation stream instead of project track development on that part, and then whatever they do on 1. Whatever will be ported into the 2.1. I think that's probably the direction Saurav is taking. Okay, we need to have offline.
So we are out of time. So let's see if we can get Saurav on the meeting on Thursday, and then have this discussion about the development work where that proceeds once the 1.7 is tagged, because our agreement out of the lockdown had been that we'd stop development on 1.7, defect fixes only, and then all new functionality would be on 2.x. So we'll table that for now since we are out of time, and we will also table the status updates for the sprint. I'm sure I won't hear many complaints there. We do have a number of reviews that are pending in Garrett, so please take a look at items. And as we're working to close out the sprint this week, please also, if you have issues that you've been working on, make sure you update JIRA as we get close to the end of the week, so we have the proper status captured when we close out the sprint. And with that, I am out of time. So any last comments before we drop the bridge today?
Make sure the community take a look at Sarav's email regarding to the additional brigades. I think right now they are the 3 brigades is going on. There's 1 brigade for ONO's FCAPs also. So if you are interested to participate, let me know or let Sarav know. We can invite you on. Okay.
Thanks, Sean. And I think we're running into the SEBA call, so a bunch of people probably need to drop and join that. We did get, again, path forward using option 1 for the Uniport identifier and the decomposed flow. And with that, we'll go ahead and drop the bridge today and resume discussion on Thursday for some of these topics. Thanks everyone.